Welcome to this special dialogue, BW dialogue, and we have a very special guest. We have Mr. Arvind Singh, Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, with us. Thank you, sir, for joining us on BW Businessworld. I want to first start that COVID, we know what the COVID story has been for the sector, and we also know the comeback story, which has been even stronger. But I want to hear firsthand from you about the revival of tourism industry at large. If you could share some of the data points, what has the story been so far?
Well, as you mentioned, there was a huge setback to the travel and hospitality industry in the 2 years of the pandemic. And the very existence of the industry was, there was a question mark about it. And there was deep distress, loss of jobs, loss of incomes. And the government of India, the state governments, the industry stakeholders, the players, all of us worked together. And we were in constant dialogue with each other, thinking of how do we come out of this? What are measures needed? What are the regulatory compliances needed? What are the tax reliefs or the fiscal reliefs needed? What are the confidence building measures needed? And I think the combined efforts of all, the smallest player in the ecosystem to the largest enterprise, to the smallest player in the government system, to the state governments, local governments, and the national government, all of us worked in sync. And I think that resulted in a very strong revival that we are seeing. And this revival has mainly been seen in domestic tourism. And the large numbers of tourists from India who are going to different parts of the country. Kashmir is an example where we are witnessing record footfalls of tourists, both in the valley and in the Jammu area. A large number of flights are landing every day. A large number of tourists are traveling there. Similarly, at many important places where work has been taken up to upgrade the spiritual infrastructure in the country, say Varanasi or Ujjain or Somnath, where all these destinations are witnessing record footfalls of domestic tourists. Right. Now, as far as international inbound is concerned, it is showing signs of revival, but it has definitely not come back to the pre-COVID level. And we expect that in the calendar year 2023, India will be one of the first countries in Asia Pacific, which is seeing very signs of domestic revival, to also get its inbound traffic back to pre-COVID levels.
So you referred to infrastructure, and I also want to, ask you this question that there has been some concern earlier that we need to develop the kind of infrastructure needed to match with the kind of footfalls and the new tourist locations. What is happening on that front, if you could elaborate on the infrastructure push?
It's well known that the kind of infrastructure push that we have seen in the country in the last few years, be it the number of highways that are being created, the kilometers of roads that are being created, the speed at which they are being created. The country has not witnessed that kind of construction of roads and highways. And I have personally seen, and I'm sure you would have also seen, how easy it has now become to reach destinations from places where we used to live, where we are living right now. Then the number of airports. The 74 airports have been added in the country after 2014, and that was exactly the number of airports that existed in the country before 2014. So the number of airports have been doubled. The unserved and underserved areas of the country have been connected by air, and you see it especially in some remote locations in the northeast, in tier 2 and tier 3 cities of the mainland, that air traffic has started, and it is increasing in many airports. Some of the unknown airports are showing very high growth rates in air traffic, and these are very encouraging signs. Similarly, the railway network has been expanded. The pace of electrification of railways has gone up. We are seeing new cruise terminals and other terminals coming up at our seaports. The net result of all this has been that it has become easier for people to access good destinations, be it by rail, road, air, or even sea cruises. Or recently you saw a very important river cruise being inaugurated by the Prime Minister. So even river cruises have started. So I think all this adds to making it easier for tourists, both domestic and international tourists, to travel to destinations which are there on the map of India.
Right. So we've also witnessed the rise of domestic traveler like never before, especially during COVID. Has that trend sustained? Are we seeing locals travel more than foreigners? What is happening on that front?
Definitely, as I mentioned, the revival of tourism in India so far has been mainly on the domestic traveler, and domestic tourism has shown very encouraging and very healthy, rates of revival. Uh, some areas of the country that I mentioned in answer to your previous question have seen very strong growth, and almost, if you see the civil aviation figures released by the Ministry of Civil Aviation, domestic air travel has almost reached pre-COVID levels. The number of people who are traveling by air every day has almost reached the pre-COVID level. International air travel and international passengers still not there. I was recently going through a study which looked at forward data on bookings of those who want to come to India. And they predicted that study predicts that while Asia Pacific has been slow to recover as far as international travel is concerned, India is one of the countries which is expected to recover the fastest in the Asia Pacific. And they expect to see that recovery of international travel to India in this calendar year 2023. So you're right, domestic travel is recovering fast, and hopefully international travel will catch up soon.
Wonderful. So, the National Tourism Policy Draft 2022, what has been the feedback from the industry stakeholders?
So we went through a consultative process, and we talked to the state governments, we talked to industry stakeholders, both at the national level and the regional level, local levels also. And the feedback has been encouraging. Some very good suggestions have come, some very positive suggestions have come, and most have welcomed the ideas or the priorities, the themes, the strategies that we have laid out in the national tourism policy. And some of the suggestions from the industry, whatever was feasible, we have tried to incorporate in the final draft that we have now prepared. And all this was done in a very transparent and open way. We put the draft on the website, sought suggestions, and we hopefully, are taking the final draft to the higher levels for approval within the government.
Right. The ministry also came out with the national strategy for promotion of rural homestays to promote experiential tourism. How has it panned out so far?
It's, that has also been a very welcome step, because what this strategy did was, bring homestays to the attention of states where it's not happening. Where, as you know, we are a very large country, and there are many states who have different experiences compared to others. Now, some states had very important and forward-looking homestay policies. If I would like to mention some states in the Northeast, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Himachal, they had policies where the state government was encouraging homestays. And this had led to a growth of homestays. Now, when we talk to industry stakeholders, talk to some of these state governments, culled out the best practices from these states and circulated by way of the national strategy to all the state governments. What this has done is brought the importance of homestays to the attention of the other states where this was not so popular. So hopefully in the years to come, we will see, homestays becoming popular in all parts of the country as an alternative to, expensive or high investment accommodation, as a means of providing employment and livelihood to locals. For instance, in my recent visit to Kashmir, I found that there are a large number of homestay applications are coming from within the valley, which is a welcome sign. It was unheard of. So you will find these trends now more happening in other states also.
Right. So there's a direct impact. There's a social aspect that is happening. Right. So, sustainability. So while we are talking about promoting homestays, new policies, sustainability has become an aspect of this, conversation, because we have seen the repercussions in some areas wherein maybe a regulatory mechanism needs to be more strict. How are you building the growth of this sector, aligning it with the environment part of it? What policies, what measures are being taken to look at those factors?
One, of course, is promoting the concept of sustainable tourism. You saw in last year when there was a heat wave in the plains, everybody who was living in the plains gravitated to the hills. And that put a lot of pressure. And there were lots of reports from different parts of the country about how it put a pressure on the infrastructure there in terms of availability of water supply, availability of transport facilities, availability of accommodation facilities. So these issues are, becoming very important, engaging the attention of the local government. And this is also leading to pressures on the environment, on the local ecology, on local environment. Now, all this is definitely, raising the threshold and about this, or the conversations about this. One discussion that is going on, and we recently heard that from a state government, is that they want to study the carrying capacity of destinations and, allow tourism only up to a certain level of carrying capacity. That is X number of people, only those who can be sustained in those areas will be allowed. Definitely, we have to think along these lines, because if the local inhabitants find that the influx of tourists is affecting them adversely, this definitely affects tourism in those areas. So I think you will see growing consciousness about sustainability at the level of the local governments and the state governments. Another important aspect in this direction is the mission and life, which was, which flew or has flown directly from the COP deliberations recently, and where it was inaugurated, the campaign of Mission Life was inaugurated by the Prime Minister and the UN Secretary General recently in India. And the idea is to take the actions, that have to be done to combat climate change, the individual actions to be put into place, the actions that have been to be taken by individuals. And I think that, the incorporation of that with the Ministry of Environment is working on that. And it will also translate into campaigns for being responsible travelers. There'll be a responsible traveler campaign that will happen. And I think all this will nudge individuals into taking action to protect the environment, to prevent the adverse effects of climate change in the future.
Right. If you look at our Prime Minister, he has emphasized on Vikas B or Virasat B for the sector. Tell me about the developments, especially around promoting Indian culture and religious tourism. Also, we are a center of culture. We pride ourselves for being, culturally rich, having a rich history. Are we matching the footfalls globally, given the kind of destinations, given the kind of cultural depth that we have, and how can we leverage those strengths?
No, definitely not. I'll take the culture question first and then come to the religious destinations. Definitely, we are not matching the, or realizing the potential. India has 40 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and which is a very large number if we compare to the numbers that are there in other countries. But the footfalls of tourists at these cultural locations are not so high, and the reasons are varied. One is the issues of access, the issue of infrastructure there, the issue of, publicity, or providing accommodation facilities, or all at these centers. So definitely that is an area that everybody is working on. And one area that we worked on was to get under the Adopt a Heritage project, which happened a few years ago, which was to create a necessary infrastructure with the help of the private sector, using CSR money or other resources that the private sector has. And you see an example of that at the Red Fort, where a leading industrial house has put in a very good interpretation center and a museum, and they have invested a lot of money. Unfortunately, due to the COVID, the idea could not be spread to other locations. I'm sure this is something that will happen. It will gain traction, and we will be able to create world-class infrastructure and facilities at our cultural locations and get them the footfalls that they deserve, given the fact that we have 40 world-class UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the country. Now, as far as religious tourism is concerned, consciously there is a scheme called Prashad, which we have been implementing over the last few years, where we have upgraded the pilgrim infrastructure. We have not done anything in the, as you say, the sanctum sanctorums of because these temples are or other religious places belong to private trusts or to government-owned endowment trusts. But within the periphery of wherever there is public areas, we have invested in tourism infrastructure, be it interpretation centers, accommodation, be it queuing facilities, toilets, or other conveniences that add to the pilgrim's convenience. And this has given us very good results. This we have done in lots of very important religious places. And the results are there for all of us to see. As post-COVID, some of the religious places are seeing, a very high growth in the footfalls of tourists, domestic. And part of that is due to the attention that has been given by both the central and the state governments to build the infrastructure for pilgrims at these centers.
Right. I have two more questions. So G20 presidency and so much is happening here. How does it match with the tourist? Are we attracting more people here? What are the preparations being done on ground to match? Because we are the center of focus.
No, definitely. Because, see, consciously, the government has selected 55 destinations or more destinations for the G20 meetings. We could have done the meetings at only the metros or large cities or state capitals. But consciously, the government of India has decided to go in for even smaller destinations. We want to project and showcase our best destinations. For instance, the Tourism Working Group meeting. The first meeting is happening in the Run of Kutch, at which the delegates will be housed in the tent city, which is there. So this has been done consciously to project the good sides or the scenic beauty of India to the audience, delegates, and to the countries who follow these delegates from these G20 countries. As you know, G20 countries are very important in terms of their contribution to the global GDP, in terms of their position in the global economy. So, of course, all sectors, including finance, environment, power, energy, all of us are working to hold our meetings. There'll be approximately, 200 meetings at these 55 plus destinations throughout the country. And the process has started in December. It will go on and culminate in the summit, which will be held in India in September, which will be held at New Delhi in September. As far as tourism is concerned, we have 4 working group meetings. The first one is at Run of Kutch. Then we'll be having one in Siliguri, Darjeeling. The third one will be in the north, somewhere in the hills. And the last one will be in Goa, where we'll have the ministerial meeting. The ministers of G20 countries will be. And we are also doing many side events to attract attention of the global community towards India. One is a investors meet in Delhi in April. Then there'll be a meeting on how to encourage MICE in India, how to encourage adventure tourism in India. And these are side events that we are planning. The World Trade and Travel Council will do a CEO's meeting just before the ministerial at Goa. So we have our plate full, and there'll be a lot of action which starts from this month going on till June in connection with the G20. So hopefully that will project India, well in the global community, and will attract more footfalls from international tourists in the years to come.
Wonderful. I think the diversity of these places, venues itself is a reflection of showcasing our strengths. My final question is about the 2023 estimates. What all is being planned, and in terms of numbers, where do you see, how do you see this year, panning out?
See, as I said, domestic tourism has almost reached the pre-COVID levels, so we expect it to cross the pre-COVID numbers this year. International, we expect it to reach the pre-COVID number because, the tourism in India was on an upward growth trajectory 2014 to 19. So 2019 was a very good year for us just before the pandemic came. So we expect the international inbound arrivals to reach that figure in this calendar year in 2023. And then from the next year, calendar year onwards, we hope our growth to be, at higher than pre-COVID levels, and hopefully continue an upward trajectory after that.
Thank you so much, sir. Pleasure talking to you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.